In the previous video, we talked about um, the idea of a good sample, collecting data that looks like the population. And we tend to think that we are good at collecting data, that individually we would do a good job. And this video is about bias, and we find out that we're not. Okay, so this is an overview of bias. Bias basically in statistics means that we have a preference. All right, we don't all like the same song, and you think your song is the most popular, but if you actually did a survey, you may find that you're not right. You might be in a group that has the most popular song, but on the other hand, you may not be. And one of the most simple things I've ever done is use the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I guess I should be sharing this, and I haven't been. So, and 1, 2, 3, and 4, and I look at it, and the most, those numbers occur. Each number occurs 25% of the time. So if I asked a group of people to select them, 25% should choose 1, 25% should choose 2, 25% should choose 3, and 25% should choose 4. However, closer to 75% choose 3 if I just put it out there randomly to people. And we discriminate against number 1. Only about 5% of the population choose number 1. And psychologists have for all sorts of reasons for why this must happen. But the fact of the matter is that represents that we have a bias. We have a bias against the first number, and we choose the third number more frequently than all the rest combined. And while that seems not that important, it actually has practical application in our world. If you consider 4 bathroom stalls lined up, people skip the first one. They often walk by number 2 and they choose number 3. So number 3 is the most used stall, which means it's usually the dirtiest and doesn't have toilet paper, whereas number 1, everyone's uncomfortable with going to the first one. Number 1 is the cleanest one and usually has toilet paper. So it's usually the best option if you're looking for a clean stall. So, all right, we admit that we have preferences. So in statistical terms, what is bias? Well, bias is simply overrepresenting and underrepresenting a component of the population in the sample. All right? So basically, we overrepresent something and underrepresented something else. So in our little simple example of the 1, 2, 3, 4, we overrepresented 3 by a lot, and we way underrepresented number 1. Bias data is bad data. You cannot make generalizations about the population. If you have biased data, you have to throw it away. You need to start all over. We can't fix biased data. And I will go out and tell you this, in general, most things in statistics gets better when you increase sample size. But if you increase sample size, you don't dilute the biased data. You still have the biased data. You have to throw it away. It's kind of like having a little bit of cancer. Well, you still have cancer, all right? Even though you diluted the amount down with the medication, you still have cancer. You're still not well, so you need to start over. The other thing about biased data, you cannot make generalizations about the population. You're overrepresenting one group, all right? You may be overrepresenting the friend group or overrepresenting freshmen or whatever when it comes to choosing the music that you like. So the key point is we need to eliminate or avoid bias. And you go, well, how do you avoid bias? You avoid bias by having a good study design, all right? Bias is introduced when our study design is poor. So in other words, we executed it poorly. So bias happens, we overrepresent something or underrepresent something in the population because we have a bad study design, which means that if we actually thought about it, we might be able to guess what part of the population is being overrepresented or underrepresented. So we often say bias is a systematic error, and that we actually can kind of get an idea of what we might be overrepresenting or we might be underrepresenting. Once again, biased data is worthless, needs to be thrown away. We cannot fix it with increasing the sample size. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about several types of bias. We have undercoverage bias. Well, I should back up and say selection bias. Selection bias is just saying that the design of our study is going to select a bad sample. Selection bias is just an overview term. It's not telling you the direction of the bias. It's just saying that we will overrepresent a part of the population or underrepresent it because of our method. So types of bias. Undercoverage bias. Undercoverage bias occurs when we have a part of the population that the design of our study will not pick up. And I'm going to pick on the US Census for the time being. The US Census initially went out for 2020, the year 2020, initially went out to those through email and mail. Well, that's very difficult because for some portions of the population, as in the homeless, don't have mailboxes and most of them don't have email. So consequently, we are overlooking the homeless. We've undercovered them. They are not included in the sample, all right? They're not included in the census, and it's very difficult sometimes to go back and find them. So undercoverage bias is the design of our study will miss a portion of the population. They're just missed. They're not going to be included because of the way our study is designed. Non-response bias actually means I actually have a good design of the study. And I really think this is probably one of the biggest problems that we have currently in sampling. Non-response bias is, you know what, I have a sample and my sample actually looks like the population. I did a really good job in design. However, for whatever reason, the people chose not to participate. I contacted them, but they didn't. I always think of the PTA the PTA packets that used to go home. Most of them didn't come back. They're not coming back would be non-response bias. I chose not to respond. All right. Yes, I received it. Yes, I had opportunity. Yes, I was randomly selected. No, I chose not to participate. Back in my day when I was much younger, actually a little bit younger than you guys, people would actually do call surveys, and I remember everyone would answer the phone and they would go, hey, we'd like you to take a survey, and the parents would say, absolutely, and they'd actually answer the questions very honestly. Nowadays, we hang up on them, all right, and we say, not before we usually say something bad or wish ill of them, or have an eternal destination for them that's extraordinarily hot. But us choosing not to respond to them is non-response bias, all right, is non-response bias. I was contacted, they randomly contacted me, but I chose not to respond. Moving on, we have voluntary response bias, which is different than non-response bias. Remember, non-response bias, I was randomly selected to participate, but chose not to. Voluntary response bias, I wasn't randomly selected. There was a call in to the radio as to what my favorite song is. There was on the website, it said, asked anyone who's on the website to please vote. There was a call in on the TV show. What do you think about this? Please vote. Or when Mrs. Shelton got on the announcements and said, hey, please vote for our student. The only people that participate in in this type of poll are those who have strong opinions. When Mrs. Shelton asked us to vote for the football player, it's like, hey, we have a strong opinion in favor of our player. We love our football team, or we want to support Reagan. So those are the ones that are volunteering to respond. Whereas from another school, they don't like Reagan, so they're not voting for us. So basically, involuntary response bias, we didn't make a random selection. We just put it out to whoever and everybody, and only those who have a very strong opinion actually vote. If I put out there on an internet question whether or not I'm going to vote for Donald Trump, hey, will you vote for Donald Trump? That's a very neutral question. However, or neutrally worded question. I'm going to receive two responses. I'm going to receive the response of people that go, Donald Trump is incredible, does big, beautiful things. He built the wall. Life is good. Nothing could be better. Donald Trump, the bomb. And then there's the other ones who go, Donald Trump is the orange Satan. The world will burn and you'd be better off dead than actually have him as your president. Vote no. The ones that are like, meh, I don't like some of the things he says. Meh, he acts in a way I don't like sometimes. Meh, he's okay. Meh, he's better than another politician. Those people don't vote. The ones that thoroughly love him and those that hate him are the ones that participate. Then we have response bias. And response bias is basically the question or the wording of the question has us give an answer that's not entirely our truthful answer. So either we were tricked into giving an answer that wasn't really our answer because it was non-neutrally worded, or it was a sensitive question and we felt the need to lie. So we minimize response bias by carefully wording and field testing questions. However, it's very difficult to do with sensitive questions. For example, when your parents asked you if you did your homework when you were little, there was always, and you hadn't done it, but you knew that if you hadn't done it, you couldn't go to your friends, or you couldn't go someplace, or you couldn't do this, or you're just going to get in trouble. In the back of your mind, whether you lied or not, the thought was you didn't want to confess that you hadn't done your homework. That's an example of a sensitive question where we tend not to give the truth. Not everyone will give the truth. Some people will give the truth, but not everyone will. Another example, more extreme, would be Coach Ham asked the team if any one of them stayed out partying on the weekend. And of course, none of the athletes raise their hand because they know that they're going to be in serious trouble. He's going to hurt their bodies in ways that they may never recover, or they feel they never going to recover. We can also impact the solutions or proportion by the way we phrase the question. Now, please remember, that doesn't mean I change everybody's mind, but I have to change a portion of the population. All right? So try this. Are you in favor of providing lunches for children that do not have enough to eat so that they have a chance to have a normal life and be productive members of society? And most people are going to say, yeah, I am in favor of that, because most people don't like the idea of having hungry, starving children. Most people want children to thrive and survive. So most people would be in favor on that. But on the other hand, if I ask for the same purpose, I ask, are you in favor of the government raising your taxes that you worked hard for and taking your money away to pay for food for people who don't work? And the answer is, well, no. And in my case, I'm saying, I'm a teacher. You don't pay me enough. Please don't take my money away. So we have several different types of bias. And the primary ones are undercoverage bias, where our design misses an element of the population. All right. We have non-response bias, where we actually have a good design, but either through our execution or the way the society works, they won't answer the survey. We randomly contact them, but they refuse to participate for whatever reason. We have voluntary response bias, and it's open up to anybody, so there's no random selection, and we tend to only get people who have strong opinions. So we overrepresent the strong opinions one way or the other. Then we have response bias, where the question is sensitive or worded in such a way that we don't tend to give an accurate response. So the actual population is not measured correctly. Okay? All right.